Hey, Cut the Shit listeners. You can find every episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Go check us out. Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Cut the Shit, a podcast series that aims to take a closer look at the impact of the IT industry, both the good and the bad. Cut the Shit is brought to you by Plow Networks, a managed IT services company based just outside Nashville, Tennessee. I'm Bryan Link, COO here at Plow, and I'll be your host for this series. I'll ask questions, and with the help of our guests, try to dig deep on some of the key challenges we all face dealing with IT. So with that, let's cut the shit and get started. On today's episode, I'm very excited to have Tony Nicolaidis as our guest. Tony is the Chief Commercial Officer at Reimagined, a Wi-Fi technology innovation startup based in Northern Virginia. During our conversation, Tony shares Reimagined's origin story, describes the market verticals they are working to serve, and shares why he believes their technology is going to have a major impact on how businesses improve their security and energy management capabilities in the very near future. Tony's got a lot of excitement to bring to the table, so I hope you enjoy my conversation with Tony Nicolaidis. Tony, welcome to Cut the Shit. How are you today?
Thank you, Bryan. It's great to be here. Appreciate the time.
Excellent, excellent. We don't know each other real well, so before we dive in, why don't you, this is something I like to ask people, but it's always a little bit of just to kind of get us going a little bit. Maybe, how about we start, you give us an example. Can you give us an example of a really interesting use of technology you've seen or heard about recently? It could be a hack. It could be an application of something old school. It doesn't really make any difference. And the answer could be personal. It could be at work, anything across the board.
Well, maybe this makes me a little bit old school, but back in the day, you remember how we used to have notebook after notebook writing. You had all these old notes. You had to keep the notebooks updated, keep the old notes around. There you go. That's exactly
Yes.
right.
Yes.
I just think since the advent of, good notes and these kind of softwares, all I take to meetings is my iPad. And that, in my opinion, is a massive step forward, I think, in terms of how you manage yourself, manage your action items, manage your what's important, what's not. And I find that on my iPad, I can do everything I need, but especially because I'm a note taker. Like you just showed, I'm a note taker. And it's the way I can't remember everything. So it's the way I keep myself straight. So maybe it makes me old school, Bryan, but just being able to take notes digitally, organize them any which way I want, be as OCD as I want about it, and be able to go back no matter how old and click on them and boom, I'm right there. Different colors, different shapes. I can be as creative as I want. I think that's great. And I still use it, something that's stuck with me to this day.
Yeah, one of my partners uses one of the Remarkable notebooks, and it's kind of it's sort of a purpose built, iPad, if you will, for note taking and for that kind of thing. But it's very similar. I mean, his argument is, I think, similar to yours in that he's a note taker by nature, likes pen to paper, but that technology has some flaw. It has some limitations, right? I mean, as we just talked about. And these applications are trying to overcome that. And I think the iPad is a perfect example. I mean, the iPad and the Remarkable really are kind of the same thing in that effort. And one may be better than the other, but conceptually they're the same. I'm
eyeballing the Remarkable, but the iPad, I can also bring up all my presentations and everything else.
Right. It's got a broader use case, and there's just no doubt about it. I mean, I think the Remarkable people would say that's why it's built that way on purpose, so that you use it for note taking. But it also means you got to carry two things with you, right? And so that's a challenge. So
maybe that makes me old school, but I'll just lay that out to you.
Well, it's not as old school as me, because I actually still write in paper notebooks and then have to figure out, where have to come up with clever little ways, I think they're clever, to try to remember where stuff is. So I'm still challenging. I'm still working on that.
Man. Whatever works.
That's right. All right. Well, to get it started, let's kind of go ahead and get to it. Why don't you give us a thumbnail sketch on kind of who you are and your background, kind of how you got to the company you're at today.
So my name is Tony Nicolaidis, as you said. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for Reimagined, and we'll talk about Reimagined here as we go along. But my story that got me here was I actually spent, Reimagined is pure software. I actually spent almost 30 years at Stanley Black & Decker doing tools, power tools, and great company.
Maryland company, right?
What's that?
It's Maryland company, right? Stanley?
It is. Black & Decker. Stanley's actually in Connecticut.
Black & Decker, though, right?
Decker's in Maryland, right?
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, yeah.
spent 30 years there designing power tools, crawling around job sites, talking to contractors about how can they build your house better, to building your work in better. And, that was great. It taught me how to develop product, how to develop businesses. In the last 5 years of Stanley Black & Decker, the company started talking about how we are going to digitize ourselves better. So I was lucky enough to lead our digitization within construction. And Bryan, that got me into building startups within Stanley Black & Decker, but in a separate office. We opened a Santa Clara office called Stanley X. And that office was responsible for doing stuff outside of the mothership that the mothership wouldn't do, pure software to serve the construction industry. That very much, once that happened to me, the startup life was the way for me. It's what I wanted to do. I love starting an idea, getting funding, getting it off the ground. So we did that. And I had another opportunity to leave Stanley Black & Decker after a long period of time and go into still another part of the contracting industry doing pure software. That was PE purchased. And then a friend of mine who also worked at Stanley Black & Decker for 30 years along with me called me and said, hey, listen, I'm at this place, Origin. The science is incredible. You got to come take a look at it. We talked. He, Spencer Maid, is now the CEO, and I'm the chief commercial officer here at Origin. But that's how I got to Origin. It was a long time doing hardware, realizing how great software is, and it eventually got me to Origin.
So some tool guys who've seen the light, so to speak.
Seen the light, exactly, man, exactly.
Well, that's perfect. I mean, you've got the T-shirt. You're ready to. You're teed up. You look startup-y. You're sort of the older version like me of that, because I've got a T-shirt with plow on it too. I could have worn that today. We could have been matching. But tell us a little bit. Give us the backstory on Origin AI and kind of how what you guys are up to.
Yeah. So in 2012, Dr. Ray Liu, who I didn't. Well, okay, I knew Dr. Ray Liu before, but you may not know Dr. Ray Liu. Dr. Ray Liu, in the global world of digital signal processing, is world renowned. If you go to IEEE or 802.BF and Wi-Fi or any of these others Wi-Fi Now conferences, his name is known globally and an expert in digital signal processing. In 2012, he was a professor at the University of Maryland, actually one of my professors, that's why I knew him. And he was working on a government contract to figure out how to communicate and use Wi-Fi within submarines. In doing so, he discovered a way to look at a Wi-Fi wave, look at the disruptions in a Wi-Fi wave, people moving through it, things moving through it, how sensitive that disruption can be, what causes disruptions in the Wi-Fi waves. It's like water waves, And he's like, wow, I think I can serve the world in a big way if we can take this and do it across the world commercially. So he put a team of 4 together. They incorporated Origin in 2012. And at the University of Maryland. And then in 2000, he baked the technology for 7 years, got it right, got it to where he wanted to be. And then he started commercial. He brought Spencer on in 2019. I came on afterwards, and we started commercializing the technology. What is the technology? Wi-Fi, as you said earlier, is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Wi-Fi is something that will become even more ubiquitous in our lives. I relate, Bryan, Wi-Fi to electricity. There was a time when electricity wasn't great and we had to get the grid right. And okay, we got grid problems now, but let's put a pin in that.
That's a different story. Yeah.
Different story, different podcast.
Wi-Fi might have that problem too in 25 years. So we'll just put that to the side, right? That's
exactly to the side. But it's going to get there. And in my opinion, when your electricity and your Wi-Fi are working, all good. When they both go out, it's all you think about because it shuts you down. And Wi-Fi is in that same space. So Wi-Fi is ubiquitous. So we said, and Dr. Ray Liu said, why don't we build a business on this where we can look at use cases where we can measure the disruption of those Wi-Fi signals and how are they disrupted? You can move through the signal. You can jump through the signal. You can do, like I said, jumping jacks. We call macro motions. You can do micro motions where you're on the TV and you're just hitting the remote control. You know what I mean? In front of the TV. Even further micro motions, breathing, believe it or not. Your torso moves up and down. Whether you're on your stomach or on your back, that's going to disrupt Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi waves. We have patents, over 100 patents that allow us to take a look at that disruption, quantify it, contextualize it, and give that feedback to whoever is interested in that data.
So you've been able to identify. So you're looking for patterns in these disruptions, as you called them, right? Or I mean, there's waves, right? And so these waves are bouncing into things or recognizing movements, right? So to try to go layman's, I'm trying to process it for myself, frankly. And you guys have done enough pattern recognition to be able to basically say this kind of disruption is probabilistically speaking X, right? With some degree
or
of
Y
certainty.
or Z. That's right.
Yeah.
You've got enough pattern and enough learning that those and the science behind it. It's not just mathematical science. It's amazing because he wrote a book. Not that I would, none of us can really read it, but there's also physics. There's time reversal in there and a lot of concepts from physics that allow us to, yes, this is what's happening. Here's a disruption in the wave. This person is doing a very large macro motion, or this person is sleeping, or this person has fallen, or this person is running, that kind of thing.
I got it. Okay. Gotcha. So you've got, in essence, Origin started as basically an academic project, or at least an applied academic project, through tech transfer out of Maryland. Has become its own deal. And now you're looking to commercialize this technology or this innovation. Is that fair?
That's
fair
exactly
statement?
right. And
Okay.
we're in 4 verticals. Let's expand on that.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's where I go next. Is what is that? Give me the breakdown on that commercialization as it stands today in terms of verticals or efforts.
Let's go residential security or small and medium business security. The first one. ISPs, internet service provider, the second one. What we call smart spaces or IoT is the third. And then health tech is the fourth. Now, as a startup, you can't water all the flowers. You can't do it all. Where are we focused right now on the first two, right? When you look at ISPs and security. Right now, on the security side, we are launching on both sides of the pond 2 large security programs in Europe. The largest European security company and second largest ADT globally, called Verisure. We are in the process of launching in all of their homes across Europe, millions of homes. They have our product in their security platform, because what we do in security, the value add in the end, Bryan, for the security vertical, is the biggest issue with security, Bryan, is false alarms, right? Whether it's a curtain moving because of the air conditioner blowing, whether it's a doors wasn't shuttled away, kind of blew open because of the wind, your pet walks through and sets off the alarm. Today, the alarm industry has no idea how to.
Motion sensors are dumb, right? Basically.
Yeah, it's just a PIR.
Yeah.
So now you have this massive problem in the industry, Bryan, where police no longer respond to residential alarms unless there's verified human presence. That's where we come in. So in Europe, for example, with Verisure, if their camera or one of their sensors trips, our system wakes up, verifies human presence, and shuts back down, right? So that way, that's what we offer and then we deliver, and our promise, our ethos is verified human presence, right? And that's going to greatly reduce the false alarm issues in the security industry. So we're launching Verisure across all of Europe. We're launching Alarm.com, which is a company you may or may not know. You know them, right? Yes. In the US, right? And we're looking at other companies also that we're talking to that we're in the process of contractual negotiations and so forth. All the biggest companies in the world, you better believe we are talking to them or launching with them. That's the security vertical. Number 2, ISPs. The challenge in the internet service market. Now, I don't know who you have down in Raleigh-Durham. Spectrum.
Yep.
We're Verizon here in the Northeast. The issue that's happening is it's becoming a race to the bottom in that industry, because it's about speeds and feeds, and those companies are looking for other ways to make their product stickier or to make them more relevant to their consumer. I love Verizon. My phone's on Verizon. I've got Verizon Fios, and they're a customer I'm going to talk about. But the only time I go to the Verizon app is to pay my bill or look if there's issues with my bill. They want to change that. They want to. Yeah. So Verizon.
I mean, it's a commodity at this point, right? Connectivity. How fast is it, and does it stay up? Does it work? Right.
Exactly. Exactly. It's very much that way, and they know that. They've known that.
Yes.
So they've launched home awareness with Verizon, which is basically in the wired segment of their market in Fios. So I have it here in the Northeast, where they're starting with like a blue orb on their app, and the smaller the blue orb or the bigger the blue orb just shows you the amount of activity in your house. Very, very well laid out app that Verizon did a lot of research on. And you can see, like, it's 3 o'clock, the kids should be home. You can kind of see that. You know what I mean? Or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, nobody should be home. And then they're going to go to other use cases. They're interested in the security use case and so forth. So they've launched here in the US. And in Europe, we're in the process of launching Deutsche Telekom, literally right now. Spence and the team are over in Europe. Actually, Spence was on a flight right now going over to Germany, talking to Deutsche Telekom. So we're going to have Verizon here, Deutsche Telekom in Europe. Deutsche Telekom owns T-Mobile. So T-Mobile comes in after that. And we have other, we're talking to other very large ISPs again. So those are the two verticals right now that we are focused on to get off the ground to show the value. So let me stop there.
Okay. All right. So let's talk specifically. You mentioned the latter two, maybe sort of the other two verticals that are going to come along. Give us a quick thumbnail on those two so we at least know what they are.
Smart spaces or IoT, right? I'll pick one very important global use case, and that is smart thermostats. You look at thermostats today, I've got an Ecobee, but I've got to have these PIR sensors. You call them dumb. It's exactly what they are. Either you're there or you're not. You can trick them. And that's what kind of tells the thermostat there's people here, right? That is a big use case that we can solve. We're talking to the largest HVAC manufacturer in the world, which, since we're not done yet, we're not going to name their name, but to launch a line of smart thermostats overall that won't need any of those PIR sensors. The thermostat will know verified human presence. And by the way, you could be sleeping, you could be just playing on the couch, like I said, you could be watching TV, you could be moving around, it'll know.
Okay.
And that way you truly understand. You don't have to set your schedule anymore, or all that kind of stuff. You can just say, hey, there's people here, it's going to be at this temperature, kind of a thing. That's the big one. The big one there. I'll tell you another one.
Side. Okay.
And the IoT, I'll give you another one that we're launched with. For a number of reasons, I can't give you the company name, but it's out there. You can go buy these bulbs at Home Depot. I can tell you that, or Amazon. Wi-Fi bulbs, we launched with them too. You can put two bulbs in a room, right, in a lamp, and those two bulbs create an oval kind of sensing zone between them. The minute you walk in, you can set the sensitivity to within a half second to come on or later. You can go as fast as within a half second, which is what we measured in terms of I've got to reach the switch and turn the switch on. And then you can set the amount of time to turn off if there's no human presence. They're already out in the marketplace too. Gotcha. So we kind of are in these smart spaces vertical, but like I said, we're focusing on security and ISP right now. And then the fourth is health tech.
Right.
That's a big one. It's a difficult use case. We can do a lot of the use cases right now. I'll give you what we're doing in Japan. There's a company called C+C in Japan, and we're not doing it in the US right now, that we're working with them. I don't know if you know, the Japanese have the largest percentage of elderly in the world.
Yeah.
And the government there, because they've discovered mailmen finding elderly passed away after whatever X period of time, the government has been completely mortified by that. For us, maybe it wouldn't be a big deal, but they're taking it very seriously. And we are working with a company called C+C over there that you can just say, hey, there's somebody in the room and they're moving. This house is okay. There is somebody there or not. There's no, the Wi-Fi doesn't pick anything up.
Right. And
we can do that kind of stuff. We can do use cases like my parents live with me. I've got the basement done for them, and there's all the elderly at least in the US, want to age independently.
Yep.
So, are they spending more time in bed this month versus outside of bed this month? Are they spending more time in the bathroom versus the kitchen? Changes in trend of what they're doing. Those are the kind of use cases that caretakers like me, because I travel a lot, are very interested in it. So that gives you a flavor of use cases around.
Yeah, for sure. So, let's talk about. You mentioned a variety of options there, and our client base is mostly we're talking mid-sized businesses for the most part. 200 to 2,000 employees very often. Some smaller and some bigger, but that's sort of our target. And a lot of we got healthcare, we've got logistics, we've got financial services, we've got some multi-location retail. Where do you see it doesn't have to be where, this may not be on your roadmap today, but as you think about the applications of what you guys have built, What do you, if you were at a conference, a bunch of our clients, and you got to tell them what they ought to look forward to and get excited about, what would it be relative to your technology to, leaders at companies that fit the description of what I just gave you? What would, because they've all got Wi-Fi all over their places, right? I mean, just like we talked about, it's ubiquitous.
You got it. So I said it in the beginning, residential and small to medium business security. They usually have a security system within their buildings, right? And within their areas. That's where I would start. I would start there, number one, and I'll say number two also, once we get into smart thermostats and monitoring heat and air conditioning, and smart bulbs, lights on, lights off. You know what I mean? Those kind of things we can immediately start to work with your customer base on. Let's start with security. Every security company now, small to medium businesses, all they're doing is putting a couple of Ring cameras outside, and they're maybe not having anything inside, or they do have a normal whatever security system. If you've got Wi-Fi, you can have security without putting all this stuff all over the place. PIR sensors and this and that and the other. So we would start there just to protect your business when there's nobody there. And then, like I said, smart thermostats, smart lighting. If nobody's in a conference room, lights can turn off. How many times you've been sitting in an office and the PIR doesn't see you anymore, and you got to do this to turn the lights back on?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Again, all those things you can avoid with what we're doing. So lighting, heating, air conditioning, or HVAC, and then security, I would say, are the three areas.
And it sounds like strategically you're really pursuing primarily an OEM strategy, right? You're looking to bake your technology. You're not getting into the device business. You're in the you're going to integrate into devices already there, right? So
just like you guys are B2B, we're B2B also. Yep. And we typically work with the Verizons and the Ecobees and all of these companies and put our solution in there, and then they go scale it.
Got it. Okay. Talk to me a little bit about some of the challenges you guys are seeing when you're in the marketplace. I mean, anytime you bring something new, it doesn't matter how good it is or how exciting it is. Anytime it's new and different, it's scary. So what have been the initial? Give us some examples of some of the some of the objections or some of the criticisms or skepticism you guys have dealt with, and will probably continue to deal with for a while.
Yeah, every startup goes through this. And if your technology is good enough and aggressive enough, people tend not to believe. So we get in front of a customer for the first time, and we get in front of let's say, one of their biz dev people, right? And we got a demo to them. Then we got a demo to somebody else, and we got a demo to somebody else, and demo to somebody else. Eventually, you demo to the really key decision makers, but it takes a while to get there. Multiple meetings, multiple sit downs. And we do this all the time. It's the prove it to me kind of a thing.
Yep. And
we do it successfully, but it takes time. Okay.
How do you prove it? How do you demo? You mentioned demo. So talk to me about a demo, because I'm curious to know if one of my clients, for some reason, will end up sitting across the table from somebody with this. How do you do show and tell here?
Good. So we do it a million different ways. The most effective way. Let's say you have a company and you're sitting over in North Carolina. And you say, "I want to see your tech." Good. We'll say, pick a Airbnb for us, right? And we'll get an Airbnb. We'll come down there. We'll set up the tech. It'll take us the morning to set up the tech. We'll get a room. We'll pick the type of Airbnb where we can keep you and your decision makers in a room that won't affect the Wi-Fi, right? Because that's the most realistic thing, right? You know what I mean? We'll put you in that room with a TV, and what you're going to be seeing is our system picking up movement as you do various motions and as things happen within the house, right? See. We'll do security use cases. We'll do whatever use cases we're talking about there. Rapid lights turning on and off use cases. And we'll do that for you right there. We'll keep you secluded, and you can ask questions. And then once the demo's done and we talk about the use cases, we take you out and show you how the tech is set up. And that's the way we typically do them.
So you've taken some devices and sort of integrated your stuff into it, whether that's a light bulb set, like you said, you've already got some light bulbs going, or some security devices that are baked into the Wi-Fi. I guess they're specialized Wi-Fi receivers, or I'm not sure.
Yeah, we go right on the Wi-Fi. We'll have a Wi-Fi chip, it's like a dev kit with our tech embedded in it. Or you may say, you know what, I make smart home detectors. And you'll say, I'd like to embed your tech on my detector. Well, we'll do that, right? And bring your detector, put it up there, and as you're walking by, your detector sees. You'll see the movement of the graph going crazy.
Yeah.
So, and that takes a long time, man. Bryan, it takes a long time, a lot of demos. And then once you get in there, once they see it, like it, then you start negotiating the business model. And then all the lawyers get involved to do a contract, and we know how that goes. Yep. And then then the clock's ticking to launch. All that, Bryan, is just time to value and revenue, and it takes a long time. Yeah. That's the challenge. It's shrinking for us, which is a great thing, but time to value, time to revenue is our challenge.
Yeah.
Was our challenge.
I get it. Okay. So let's talk about the underlying technology, because we've at least for the 15, 20, 30 minutes we've been talking now, we've assumed we've talked about Wi-Fi as if it's static, right? That it's a flat technology, and maybe that's the case, but I don't know. Maybe you can educate us a little bit on sort of the history and the evolution of Wi-Fi and sort of where it is today, and where do you guys think it's going? Do we expect things to change, or what's Origin's take on Wi-Fi because that's sort of the critical enabling technology for what you guys are offering?
It is. I mean, look, Wi-Fi is only going to get better and more reliable as we go into Wi-Fi 6 and others. There are standards like 802.11bf that help us a lot, because all the chip manufacturers that make Wi-Fi chips, the Synaptics, the Broadcoms, the NXPs, the guys that we know, they're going to standardize the way that our tech, believe it or not, can communicate with the chip, right? So that it'll speed us up, because their tech will be Origin ready. You know what I mean? So the standards are going to help us. It's going to help us shrink that time to value. Working within 2.4, 5, and 6 gigahertz bands is going to help us. Right now we're in 2.4 and 5. But all those kind of movement forward with Wi-Fi will only make it more reliable, and will only get our technology to be to become much better overall, and allow us to get better, clearer data points. So all that stuff only helps us as we move along.
Okay. When you're talking to prospects and current clients too, when it comes to making decisions about, how best to leverage, sort of Wi-Fi connectivity within the context of what you guys are doing, what are they worrying about most when it comes to dealing with these issues or the issues at hand? And in your opinion, are they worrying about the right things?
That's a great question. Look, when we talk to our potential customers, their biggest issue is, will the technology work for all the use cases that I want them to work, right? So once they see the demo, then they start thinking, okay, in my smoke detector or my thermostat or my whatever, my router, we've been tested so thoroughly to not affect bandwidth on routers, Bryan, because, they don't want us to affect any of the bandwidth. We're not there to take any. So we've literally affect none of the bandwidth, because we're completely on the edge, and we've set ourselves up to be successful with ISPs that way. So they test it thoroughly to make sure it will meet their use cases without hurting the use cases that they're already doing, and that's usually their biggest concern overall. Then after that, Bryan, you get into cost, and you got to talk about the business model itself. Some markets are more elastic than others. And then you kind of figure out where you are from there and nail down the future with the relationship between us and the customer.
Right. Right. And are you seeing any sort of, anytime you throw out the word security, right, you immediately bring up, secondary issues around compliance or insurance or other things like that. Are any of those forces, affecting the sales cycle for you, either as tailwinds or headwinds? Because it could be both. An insurance, if it helps, if this would help a client from an insurance perspective, whether that's getting, different kinds of coverage or lower premiums, well, that's good for you. The flip side is the same as well. Does it raise issues that would potentially cause problems for them in a compliance sense or others? I don't know the answer, so I'm just curious.
So let me tell you this. In the security industry, there's this new standard called ABS-01, where now, because the police are no longer responding to alarms, they're saying we want verified human presence. That right there works right in our favor. Major tailwind for us.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a big one, I think, overall. Health tech, where Medicare, Medicaid, and all the other insurance companies out there is going to help us there. So I think overall, they're tailwinds. It's a matter of convincing the customers, doing the demos, letting them see that we are a technology they can count on, and getting it out to the marketplace.
Yeah, it feels like from a treatment facility or an inpatient facilities from a health perspective, seems like a natural fit for the concepts you guys are offering.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's an area that we are not exactly moving 1,000 miles an hour in like we are in security and ISPs, but believe me, that's coming quickly. So our eyes are clearly on it.
All right. Well, so, as you look ahead, I mean, obviously, it's clear you got a lot of optimism and you're excited about what you guys are doing. When you think about sort of let's take, I mean, it's going to sound like a longer time horizon in startup land than it would in a more established business, but let's take 2 to 3 years, that kind of time frame. What excites you most when you think about that time frame?
How we can help the security industry become so much better. That's the first thing that hits me. How can we help the security industry eliminate false alarms? This is a massive, when you get into these conversations with, by the way, the security market in the US alone is a $17 billion market. Globally, it's over 80. It's a massive market. And, how we can eliminate false alarms. Do you have it?
Is there any kind of estimates on what percentage of alarms are false versus true? Yeah. What do the data show?
62% of customers that have a security system in the US have had at least one false alarm in the last 12 months, right? There are over 40%, we have it by county, over 40% of the calls in Jacksonville County in Florida are false alarms, residential. Over 25 here in Baltimore County, right? And then on the West Coast, it's a little lower because they've instituted fines now. If a police officer comes to your house and it's a false alarm, they're fining people $200 to $500, and all of a sudden, people are really cognizant of whether they're going to send the police. But by the way, here's a scenario, Brian. You're sitting in the office, you're in the middle of a meeting, you get a call from your alarm company saying, "We just saw movement in your house. Do you want us to send the police?" What exactly are you supposed to do?
Right. How are you supposed to discern whether that's a false positive or not in time to avoid the fine if it's false? Right.
What is it? So you're going to most likely say, "Yeah, send them. I'm not there. I don't know what to say." Right. This is the problem, and that's what most excites me. I think we can make a massive impact, a massive improvement on that problem.
All right. So on the flip side, you think about that same time horizon. What scares you the most?
That time to revenue, shrinking it and keeping the business growing, right? Because as a startup, we have investors and, we've got to show growth. Yep. So that time to revenue is getting it moving and it's shrinking, which is great. We're ecstatic about it, but keeping revenue going as fast as possible. You know what I mean? So that's the thing that it's number one on everybody's mind at Origin.
All right. Well, we'll kind of stop there. I always like to wrap up with something personal, not too personal, but personal. So how about you share something that you've read or watched lately that you think others ought to check out?
Oh man, I read it once a year. If you're in a startup, read Crossing the Chasm. Crossing the Chasm, in my opinion, there's a million startup books. Crossing the Chasm, in my opinion, is the ultimate playbook for startup life. When should you do things that are maybe they're not sustainable versus when do you have to become more efficient? How do you jump that early market to mid-market chasm, which is mammoth? Yep. Because what happens, most people don't get enough momentum and they just end up falling right down in the chasm and they're gone. Yep. Read it, know it, live it. I read it every year. It's an awesome book.
We'll put a line in the show notes about it so people can go check it out.
Gregory Moore, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, Tony, we'll wrap there and let you get back to it. You got time to revenue to deal with, so we'll let you get on the phone and make some phone calls. And also check on your CEO and make sure he makes it to Germany.
There you go. Brian, it was a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Thanks again. Thanks again for coming on Cut the Shit. We really appreciate it, and I enjoyed meeting you.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, we'd appreciate it if you would become a subscriber wherever you get your podcasts. And if you could rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, that would really help us out. Or you can just go old school and tell your friends, your family, your colleagues, and hell, anybody else who you think might want to hear something like this to listen in. If you're on social media, make sure to follow us on TikTok at Cut the Shit Pod, all one word, where we post lots of clips from the podcast. And last but not least, you can also watch the YouTube version of the show on our YouTube channel at Plow Networks. Until next time, take care and have a great day.